Hi, this is Kendall Boyson, professional life and recovery coach, and you're listening to Encouragementology, the practice of instilling hope. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. On this show, we are exploring the power of influence, recognizing what shapes us, and taking back control. We have all been bombarded with messaging, asking, begging, and sometimes forcing us to think, feel, and take action. Where do your own thoughts hide in the midst of such assaults? Influence has a pervasive force in our lives that can shape our choices, our mindset, and even our identity. It can feel like a current. Sometimes it gently guides us, but other times it's strong enough to sweep us off our feet. The key is recognizing where influence is coming from and deciding how much power to give it. Let's take a big breath here and make a commitment to unpack, resort, and purge some influencing ideas that no longer serve us in a positive way. Influence is more than just peer pressure. It's subtle and can come from various sources like friends, family, social media, society, our inner dialogue, and even our environment. A close friend's advice feels comforting but can sometimes lead you down their path instead of yours. Social media trends can push you to buy, think, or act in ways you normally wouldn't. Influence of a mentor or a loved one can impactfully shape your values and ambitions. I know it won't come as a surprise that about 60% of people report that social media negatively affects their self-esteem, often due to comparison with others' idealized online personas. Maybe you don't watch normal TV anymore and avoid commercials on your streaming services. But did you know that a study found that 49% of consumers rely on influencer recommendations on social media to make purchasing decisions? And did you know that influencers are only recommending products because they were sent them for free to promote, not because they explored all their options and picked the best one? But nearly 40% of millennials believe that influencers understand their tastes better than family and friends, underscoring the strong sway social media influencers have on personal preferences. When it comes to the news, I know, touchy subject, but around 64% of adults in the U.S. say that fabricated news has caused a great deal of confusion about current events. Furthermore, studies indicate that misinformation spreads 70% faster than factual news on social media. A touchy subject, but valuable insight. Media consumption is highly correlated with political polarization. People who get their news from cable networks or social media are more likely to hold polarized views than those who use multiple news sources. As we discern what is healthy and what is not, it's important to diversify points of view. The messages don't discriminate and can infiltrate even the most innocent. Over 80% of teenage girls feel pressured to be thin after watching television shows that idealize certain body types. Also, exposure to idealized male physiques on TV has been linked to body dissatisfaction in men. We know that shock and awe can be intriguing. True crime shows and podcasts have millions and millions of followers, but be informed that frequent exposure to crime dramas and news about crimes leads many viewers to overestimate the prevalence of crime in society, a phenomenon known as the mean world syndrome. Where are we getting all this influence? Adults in the U.S. now spend about 7 hours per day consuming digital media, with social media alone averaging around 2.5 hours daily. Media isn't just a passive part of our lives, but an active influence force. By being aware of these effects, we can take steps to make more intentional choices about the media we consume and how it impacts our well-being. Think about your day today or yesterday. What messages have you received, and where did they come from? Which of these messages felt positive, and which felt like a tug in the wrong direction? Tyler Jensen, a psychotherapist, sheds some light on the allure of negativity, why our brains are drawn to it. Why is negativity so attractive to our brains? Negativity is an omnipresent force in our lives, permeating our thoughts, conversations, and media. It can be defined as the tendency to focus on and give more weight to negative experiences, emotions, or information than positive ones. The prevalence of negativity defies logic. After all, why would we be so drawn to negativity when happiness and positivity are universally seen as desirable? Delving into the intricate workings of our brains offers us insights into this perplexing phenomenon. Negativity surrounds us like a thick fog on a misty morning. We encounter it in various forms, from everyday gripes and complaints to sensationalized news headlines that grab our attention. It seems almost effortless for negativity to seep into our minds and take hold of our thoughts. This begs the question, why are we so receptive to negative stimuli? Our brain's affinity for negativity can be partially attributed to its evolutionary roots. In ancient times, when survival was paramount, being acutely aware of potential dangers was crucial for staying alive. Our ancestors needed a highly attuned sense of danger detection to navigate treacherous environments with predator threats and other risks. This survival instinct has deeply ingrained itself within the neural pathways of our brains over thousands of years of evolution. As a result, humans possess what scientists refer to as negativity bias. This bias predisposes us to focus more on negative stimuli than positive ones. This deeply ingrained preference for negativity persists even in modern times where physical threats may not be as prevalent. Negativity bias stems from the idea that negative experiences have a more substantial impact on us than positive ones, due to their ability to trigger survival-related mechanisms within our brain. When faced with a negative stimulus, like a potential threat or an unpleasant event, our brain's amygdala, which is the emotional processing center, rings the alarm bells. This activation creates a cascade of responses, including releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These psychological reactions heighten our senses and prepare us to fight or flight. Consequently, negative experiences create stronger memories, deeply etched into our minds, than positive ones. This is known as the negativity-induced memory enhancement effect. Furthermore, negative stimuli tend to capture and hold our attention more effectively than positive ones. This heightened attention to negativity is an adaptive mechanism that helps us quickly identify potential environmental threats. By prioritizing negative information, we become better equipped to respond promptly and protect ourselves from harm. In light of these evolutionary factors, it becomes clear why negativity has such a powerful pull on our brains. But there are other psychological and cultural factors at play as well. Understanding this intriguing aspect of human cognition requires exploring the neurological mechanisms and the impact of social influences and emotions. Let's delve into these facets in greater detail to unravel why negativity is so attractive to our brains. Confirmation bias, which is the reinforcement of beliefs and fears. This is a cognitive bias deeply ingrained in our thought process, and it plays a significant role in our attraction to negativity. It refers to the tendency to seek out and interpret information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or fears, while ignoring or dismissing evidence that contradicts them. This bias is potent regarding negative information as it validates our negative worldview. For example, suppose someone believes that the world is a dangerous place. In that case, they're likelier to pay attention to news stories focusing on crime and violence than those highlighting positive events. This reinforcement mechanism can be understood through the concept of cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we experience when faced with conflicting beliefs or information. By seeking out negativity that aligns with our existing mindset, we alleviate this discomfort and maintain consistency in our thoughts. Unfortunately, this confirmation bias can perpetuate a cycle of negativity. We selectively consume content that reinforces our pessimistic outlook on life, further solidifying negative thoughts and perceptions. Availability heuristic, the weight of vivid memories. This heuristic relies on easily accessible examples of memory to judge frequency or probability. We tend to overestimate the prevalence of negative events based on their vividness and prominence in our memory. Negative experiences often impact us more profoundly than positive ones due to their potential threat or harm. As a result, they become more salient within our mind's storage system. They're more readily available for retrieval when assessing future probabilities. For instance, people may fear flying after hearing news reports of plane crashes, despite statistical evidence indicating that air travel is one of the safest modes of transportation. The availability heuristic and confirmation bias reinforces our inclination toward negativity. We unconsciously rely on past negative experiences and ready available examples to judge the world around us. This leads to a disproportionate focus on negative events and an inflated perception of their frequency or likelihood. One of the most significant factors contributing to the attractiveness of negativity in our brains is how it's portrayed and sensationalized in the media. Traditional and digital news outlets focus on negative events due to their potential for higher viewership and leadership. I do have to admit, there was a time when I only skimmed the surface of media and listened to the loudest voices or the most attractive ads. I just wanted to be entertained, but didn't really go too deep with any of it. What I didn't realize was that by just collecting the clickbait and trying to make sense of it all, I was left with a pretty warped sense of the world. This day and age is running on nitrous, barreling down the road at 120. You feel this pressure to consume information from everywhere at such a rapid pace that it's impossible to keep up. So what's the alternative? Slow down, pick one or two, and go deeper? Good plan, but make sure you move around a bit to look at a topic from all angles. And above everything, trust your gut, which is directly linked to your brain. The average person has over 60,000 thoughts a day, according to Dr. Fred Luskin at Stanford University. Of those 60,000, 90% of them are repetitive through the day and from previous years. That's a whole lot of thoughts. How many of those are yours? Negative influence doesn't always announce itself. It can show up as social comparison that makes you feel less than you are and that you need to change who you are. It could show up as self-doubt, triggered by people who second-guess you or imply you're not enough. And it could also show up as the feeling of shoulds. I should be achieving this. I should be buying that. I should look like this or that, based on societal pressures. So how do you start taking back control and at least double checking that you're considering your own thoughts? Where is that influence coming from? Well, before you engage with media, whether it's news, social media, or entertainment, take a moment to reflect on what you're about to consume. Ask yourself why you're choosing this source and consider whether it aligns with your values and your goals. Develop a habit of asking, who created this and what might be their motivation? For example, consider whether a brand, an influencer, or a network could have hidden interests. Recognizing potential biases helps you stay in control of how you interpret information. It's important to set boundaries. If you notice certain media or social media accounts lead to self-doubt, stress, or unhealthy comparison, consider unfollowing them, muting them, or setting at least a time limit on those platforms. Choose to follow people, brands, and organizations that support your goals or align with your values and inspire you in a constructive way. Make it a rule to engage with content that adds positivity and growth to your life. So how do you start taking back control and at least double checking that you're considering your own thoughts? Where is that influence coming from? Well, before you engage with media, whether it's news, social media, or entertainment, take a moment to reflect on what you're about to consume. Ask yourself why you're choosing this source and consider whether it aligns with your values and your goals. Develop a habit of asking, who created this and what might be their motivation? For example, consider whether a brand, an influencer, or a network could have hidden interests. Recognizing potential biases helps you stay in control of how you interpret information. It's important to set boundaries. If you notice certain media or social media accounts lead to self-doubt, stress, or unhealthy comparison, consider unfollowing them, muting them, or setting at least a time limit on those platforms. Choose to follow people, brands, and organizations that support your goals or align with your values and inspire you in a constructive way. Make it a rule to engage with content that adds positivity and growth to your life. At Knowledge of Wharton, I found invisible influence, what really shapes our decisions. This is an interview with the author Jonah Berger. Berger is asked, what was the inspiration for focusing on social influence as a topic for your book? Berger said, that's a funny story. I mention it briefly in the book. A number of years ago, my dad was buying a new car. He lives in Washington, D.C., and he's a lawyer there. He bought a BMW. Then he was complaining that all D.C. lawyers buy BMWs. I said, well, Dad, you bought a BMW too. He said, oh, but mine's a blue one. Everyone else drives a gray one. What's really funny about that is social influence happens in the world. We see everybody else doing the same thing. Oh, look at all those DC lawyers. They all drive the same car. But when it comes to our own behavior, sometimes we feel like our own behavior is somehow privileged or different. I'm a rugged individual. I'm independent. No one else has any effect on what I do. Actually, we're kind of wrong. What I thought would be interesting to talk about in this book is all the science about how others shape our behavior, often without us knowing it, and what we can do about it and how we can use it to live happier and healthier lives. In your previous book, Contagious, focused on why things go viral, do you feel like there's an interplay between social influence and virality? Berger said, certainly. They are both related to how people shape other people's behavior or decisions. The first book, Contagious, was more about how do we influence others. If I'm a business owner or I have an idea I want to spread within my organization, Contagious was about we know word of mouth matters. How do I get people to talk about and share my stuff? Invisible influence is almost the converse or the opposite. It's, well, how are other people affecting my behavior? Sure, we can use that to influence others, but we can also use it to make ourselves better off, to help us make better decisions or be healthier when we're having trouble doing it. From Wharton, the book is really not about how to go above the influence. You make the point that resistance is a bit futile when it comes to social influences. Whether we know it or not, it's happening. Berger. That's, I think, the most interesting part. We see it all the time. If you ask people, oh, of course, my neighbor bought this thing because someone else bought it, or my wife did this thing because someone else was doing it, but we don't necessarily see it in ourselves. The idea resistance is futile is important. What we have to be careful of, though, is influence isn't always a bad thing. Imagine if we couldn't use others as a source of information. If every time we wanted to figure out where to go to dinner or what movie to watch, we had to sample it ourselves, it would be exhausting. We would have to read all the information and look at all the options and sample a little bit here and there. Others are a really helpful cue. Others often help us make better decisions, but not always. Invisible influence talks about when do others help us make better decisions? When do they make worse decisions? When do others motivate us? When do they demotivate us? And how can we use this to be better off? If we know that social influence is going to play a role, how can we harness that and use it to help us make better decisions? Berger. One thing I talk a little bit about is motivation. Others often affect whether we give up, whether we try harder, how we use that to be better off. One thing I felt in my own life, you want to exercise, you want to be healthier, how can you use others to help you do that? Simple tricks like working out with other people, really having someone else to compare yourself to, matter. There's a lot of research on something called social facilitation. Merely biking with someone else, for example, makes you bike faster. Running with someone else makes you run faster. Swimming with someone makes you swim faster. Others can help us do things that we might not do otherwise. So we can set up situations where we actually encourage ourselves to be healthier, encourage ourselves to make better choices by shaping our environment through others. Wharton. What are the factors that go into determining whether social influence will make us want to, for example, buy the same car as our neighbor versus buying a different one? Or make us want to work harder versus giving up? Berger. I'd have to give you a long answer for all of it, but some simple things are, first, others often provide information. When you're uncertain about what to do, we often look to others. That leads us often to the same thing, yet at the same time, we want to see ourselves as different. Particularly in American culture, we like to see ourselves as special snowflakes. like my dad buying the blue BMW rather than the gray one. Maybe we pick the same car because we know it's a good car because others have bought it. But we pick a different color because colors allow us to feel different. So we're similar and different at the same time. We're optimally distinct. Or in terms of motivation, for example, others can motivate us, except when they're too much better than we are. If we compare ourselves to someone who's much better, much faster than we are, sometimes it causes us to give up. We say, well, there's no way I'm going to reach that standard or that score or that level of performance. They are so much better than I am, I'm not going to try anymore. It's really about understanding the subtle differences of social comparisons and understanding the situations people are in that help us figure out which way to go. You have a couple of really interesting examples like this in the book. My favorite one was why social influence makes it harder for us to parallel park, but easier to tie our shoes. The reason is, I hate it when people watch me parallel park. I'm horrible at it if somebody's watching. I'm a master at it if no one is. Burger. There's this wonderful old study on motivation. This researcher was interested in just the question you were interested in. He looked at a bunch of research and said, well, sometimes others seem to be motivating. They lead us to work harder, do better. Sometimes they lead us to get demotivated, do worse. Why is that? What are situations that lead to one versus the others? He wanted to figure out a way to test it. He designed this amazing experiment with running, looking at how running was affected by other individuals watching you run. But he didn't do it with people. He did it with cockroaches. He built this cockroach stadium where these little cockroaches would run cockroach races, run from one stadium side to the other. But then he could manipulate whether other cockroaches are watching them. He's interested in, well, how does the mere presence of others affect what we do? He had them run one of two mazes. One was either straight ahead, just really easy, or one where you had to run straight and then make a left turn really difficult. Do I go right? Do I go left? What do I do? What he found is when the task was easy, when it was well learned, running straight, something cockroaches know how to do well, having others around helped them do better. They ran faster with others than they did by themselves. But when it was a difficult task, when they had to figure it out, do I go left? Do I go right? Then it was more complicated. The mere presence of others actually made them do worse. As you mentioned, parallel parking. If we know how to do things well, if they're easy things we've already done a bunch of times, then having others around makes us do them better. If you're great at shooting pool, for example, shooting pool with someone else will actually make you better at shooting pool than by yourself. But if you're not so good at shooting pool, if it's something that you're not used to doing, if it's difficult for you, then having others around can make you do worse. Parallel parking, for example, maybe some of us are good at it, but most of us tend to be a little nervous to begin with. We're not excellent parallel parkers. Merely having someone else in the car can make it more difficult for us. It makes us more nervous, more anxious. While that anxiety can help us do better when it's easy for us to do tasks, they can lead us to do worse when it's a difficult or complicated task. So to get back a little bit to buying cars, you mentioned in the book that social influence can actually make rich people more likely to buy different cars than their neighbors. But for those of us who are more middle class, it might actually cause us or influence us to buy the same car. Burger. We tend to think in American culture that uniqueness is the right answer. People who are unique and different are good, and people who are conformist are bad. But it's not really a right or wrong answer. It's more of a cultural value. Think about East Asian culture context, for example, where fitting in, being a good member of the group is the right answer. It's not the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's the nail that stands out gets hammered down. That's even true in American cultural contexts. In working class contexts, people like being part of a group. People like being connected to others who are like them. Why would it be bad if you had the same car as your neighbor? It shows that you like the same things, that you have a lot in common. Whereas in other parts of American culture, we say, oh, standing out is the right thing to do. Why would I want to do the same thing as everybody else? I want to show that I'm different. What's interesting is uniqueness isn't a right answer or a wrong answer. It's just a way of behaving based on our social environment. Wharton, as the internet has become part of our daily lives all the time, and social media has become more of our daily lives, it's easier and easier to know what your friends are doing. It's easier for companies to know even what your friends are doing. How does that play into social influence and the degree of which social influence is playing a role in our decisions? Berger, what's so interesting about the internet is it has made information spread faster. It's easier, as you nicely said, to see what others are doing. But that has two differing effects. First, it makes it easier to copy others. We hear a new band. Our friends are listening. We're going to listen too. It makes things catch on much faster than they would have before, which seems great. If you're that band, it seems fantastic. I've caught on. But it also makes it easier for people to switch to something else or avoid something because too many people are doing it. As I talk about in the book, we don't just want to be similar. We also want to be different. And so sometimes when too many people like a particular band, we say, well, I don't like it anymore. I like their old stuff before they became mainstream. And so what it's really done is it's led to faster cycles of fad and fashion. Things catch on more quickly, but they also die out just as quickly. One thing I talk a lot about for companies and organizations is how do we manage this? As a brand, for example, I want to catch the upswing. I want everyone to be buying my product. But how do we avoid the downswing when people say, well, it's too popular. I don't want it anymore. Or if those people are doing it, maybe I don't want to do it. How can we capture the good aspects and avoid the bad? It seems like it would be so fleeting for companies to catch the upswing. By the time you know there is an upswing, it's already on the downswing. Berger, yeah, a little bit. What's also allowed and possible now is there's so much rich behavioral data that we can get more of a sense of who's buying something, what else they bought, and what else they like. Amazon, for example, has a good sense of what type of books we like and can say, well, these types of people are used to buying this. Now, a different type of folks are buying it. I agree with you. It's not perfect data, but it's certainly better than it has been before. When you were writing this book, were you surprised to realize how social influence played into our decisions? Berger, yeah, I'm the worst person to shop with or make decisions with. I have a huge problem making decisions. Part of it is because I'm always thinking, well, what are other people doing? I'm saying, is the reason I'm doing it because other people are doing it, or do I really like it myself? What's interesting is there's no answer to that question. Others often affect us without our realizing it. But by being aware of it, sometimes hopefully we can make better decisions than we would have otherwise. Nonconformists conform just as much as everybody else. Wharton, are you saying we have this vision, particularly in American culture, of the rugged individualist, we place a very high value on nonconformists. Nonconformists are the best. They're path breakers. They are above the influence. Does a nonconformist really exist? Burger. There's a great cartoon, South Park, you're probably aware of it, that has a show where one of the characters says to another, "Oh, you can be a nonconformist if you don't drink coffee." What I think is so true about that is even nonconformists are conforming. It's very rare that you find someone that's not influenced by anyone else. Even avoiding what others are doing, you're still being influenced. You're just saying, well, I don't want to be like them. Goths, for example, you look at kids that dress in all black. Well, they're actually pretty similar to one another. We like to see ourselves as different. We like to think, oh, the unique person, the nonconformist, they win out. They lead companies. Really, those people conform just as much as everybody else. It's just that they don't seem like they're conforming because they may not be doing what the mainstream is doing, but they tend to still do what other people like them to do. On Simon Sinek's YouTube channel, as always, I've found some wise words on how to stop holding yourself back. Let's take a listen.
The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. It is incapable. Yes, it's true. I'll give you an example.
I believe you.
Okay? No, I'll give you an example. You don't have to believe me. I'll prove it. Okay? The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. You ready? Don't think of an elephant. Oh. Yeah, I know. You can't tell the human brain not to do something, right? And so what happens is we very often reinforce things when we put things in the negative, right? I can't get apart. I can't get apart. I can't get apart, right? Or I can't do this versus I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this, right? And it's such a huge thing to convert things into the affirmative. You're supposed to do it with children as well. We're supposed to say, instead of saying to children, don't eat on the couch, we're supposed to say, eat at the table. Right? We tell people what we want them to do, not what we don't want to do. Pilots know this, right? It is well known in the pilot community that when you tell a pilot, don't hit the obstacle, they'll hit the obstacle. Because what they're doing is focusing on the obstacle. Skiers know this. If you ever seen skiers go through trees, do you know how they do that? It's very easy. It's actually surprisingly easy. If you go through trees on skis and you go, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, guess what you're watching? You're only looking at trees. All you're doing is seeing trees. You don't understand how anyone can ski with all these trees, right? As opposed to follow the snow, follow the path, follow the path. The only thing you see is the path. Skiers know this. If you say don't hit a tree, you'll hit a tree. You won't be able to find a path because all you see is millions of trees. If you say only follow the path, you actually don't see any trees. There's actually very sparse trees. There's plenty of path. There's plenty of snow. It's the same thing for you. If you focus on the obstacles, all you will see is obstacles. If you focus on the path through the trees, all you will see is path through the trees. It's your choice how you choose to perceive your own career. It's literally perspective.
If you want to share encouragementology with a friend who needs to know they're not alone in this journey of self-discovery, you can visit encouragementology.com or anywhere you stream your content to receive this episode and all others. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional encouragement throughout the week. So I challenge you. Remember, influence is a force we all experience, but it doesn't have to control us. Recognize what's guiding your path. Decide what you want to allow in, and remember that you have the power to steer your own journey. I know you can do it. Thank you for listening to Encouragementology with Kendall Boyson, where we find positive ways to handle some of life's challenges.
I stumbled through until the path was clear.